Welcome to Google Headquarters. I'm Louis Gray. I'm here to talk to you today about Google Data Studio. I have with me Product Manager for Data Studio, Nick Mihailovski. We introduced the Google Data Studio as part of the Analytics 360 suite earlier this spring. In the last several months, we've added some new features. We introduced a free version for all United States users. And we're going to be bringing Data Studio 360 and the free version to new countries throughout the rest of the year and beyond. We're not talking about those launches today, but we are going to talk about the vision for the product, where it came from, and some new product highlights. So to get us started, I'm going to hand it off to Nick.
Thanks, Louis. So today what I wanted to do is give you a quick overview with a couple slides. I have a nice little demo to show off the product, and I want to show some examples of what's possible. With that, let's just look at why do we actually build the product? So it comes from some stats, and it really is about 60% of marketers said that measurement tools are actually difficult to use. And when they're difficult, that means information is not going to the right stakeholders and decisions aren't being made driven by data. And so we started talking to customers about how do they actually work with data? What are the challenges that they're facing? And what we uncovered was really interesting, that most people, regardless of the data they're working with, actually go through a common workflow where they need to be able to connect to data, acquire, prepare it. They need to be able to visualize it, to explore, answer questions, and communicate the data. And finally, they need to be able to share this with their key stakeholders. And so when we started looking at, well, how do people accomplish these steps today? It turns out there's many different tools people are using, right? Turns out all your data is not in one central location. You have data in Excel sheets and CSVs and different databases and different service providers. When you want to visualize it, you have to somehow get all that data in the format you need and put it into a presentation or use a different tool. And then finally, how are you communicating, right? How are you sharing? You're usually emailing this around. Now, imagine when your boss came to you, or one of your reports, and said, and you've seen a report that you've created, and they said, can you please update it? Or how many times have you had to go back the next week and re-update all the data? Going through all those steps is a ton of work, right?
And this is something marketers have always had to do. Whether you have to do a weekly report or monthly report, it's like you have all this work you have to do just before the weekend or just after it. What you need is a tool that automatically does it for you.
Exactly. What if you could take that time, spend more time on vacation, right? That's the end goal, is how do we make more people more productive? And that's really the vision around Data Studio 360, is how do we unify this workflow across these various stages that people work with data? So Data Studio has two specific tools. There's a data source tool that allows you to manage, allows you to access, transform, and govern data. And we have a reports tool that allows you to create very flexible reports and dashboards. And we built, as you'll see in the demo, sharing as a fundamental layer across both of these different tools. We really looked at it from the ground up of how do you share different reports and data sources, and it's pretty amazing what happened there.
I mean, just introducing this at all gives me a whole bunch of questions that I know that our users and our viewers want to talk about in terms of what types of reports, what kind of things can you share, what kind of fun stuff you can do. I know we're going to get through that in the demo.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and get into that.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things, too, is we want to be agnostic. The product's actually agnostic to all the different data sources that we can connect to. And we're building these connectors to make it easy to work with many different types of data. We have connectors to Google Analytics and 360 Suite, of course. But we have also connectors to AdWords. We just launched an updated one to make it easier to work with data. BigQuery, Sheets. Sheets has been fantastic. People have been bringing data from many different sources into Sheets. We're working on YouTube and SQL as well. And we have a whole roadmap for that. So it's really more of a platform that you can use to connect to various different data sources, not just the 360 Suite. So with that, why don't we just jump into a demo and talk a little bit about what the product actually is?
Absolutely. And like I was saying before, there's really kind of two pieces. The Data Studio, obviously the reports, and then the data sources themselves. Maybe you can give us an understanding of what kind of demo we're going to see first. What are we getting into?
Exactly. I'm going to show you how quick it is to build a report using the product. Okay. Through that, I'm going to show a little bit of the data sources and show a little bit of the reports tool.
Let's get into it.
Great. So here's the screen. Here's the product. If you go to datastudio.google.com, you can follow along. And so what I'm going to first do is I see a list of reports. Here we see on the left-hand side reports and data sources. So here's the list of all of my reports. So the first thing I'm going to do, click the plus to create a new report here. And it'll take a second to load up the experience. And this is all running off my browser. So you can access it from any computer. So the first thing I need to do is bring data into this report, right? And to bring data, we need to create what's called a data source. And so to do that, I'll click this handy button, Create New Data Source, and I'll get a panel here. And what we're going to do with the data source is connect to one of the data sets that I have access to. And there's a lot of things we can do with the data source, but I just want to show you how easy it is to connect. We have access to many different things like AdWords, BigQuery, Cloud SQL. We're adding a whole bunch more. What I'm going to focus on right now is looking at Google Analytics. And what I'm going to have to do is select my profile. So I'm going to go ahead in here and...
You've got a lot of profiles here, Nick.
I've got a lot of accounts. And then I'm going to go in and then, yeah. So here's some properties. So I'm going to look at this merchandise store. And I have a bunch of views. So I'll click the master view. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and connect. And take a second here. OK, cool. And so now we're looking at all the dimensions and metrics I have access to from this connector.
And how does it know what you have access to? Like when you first logged in, you had a whole bunch of different sources for data.
Right.
So does this authenticate against your Google account? Like how does it know what to plug into?
Yeah, we use everything is first-party authorization. We actually use OAuth. So you get to actually, the first time, you'll get a little prompt that says Data Studio would like to access Google Analytics. Or Data Studio would like to access AdWords. And then everything is centered around yourself. So you're always connecting on the data that you have access to. But then with our sharing model, you can actually share with other people through your access.
Cool.
So we looked at analytics. We connected to it. We see a whole bunch of dimensions and metrics. And what I'm going to do is just go ahead and add this to our report. And I'll click Add to Report. And here we're dropped now into the report editor, right? And so to start visualizing data, I can come up into this toolbar. And I could click time series, and I could just draw this visualization right on the canvas, just like that. And you'll notice some magic just happens. Just like that, we're visualizing data.
Right, just did it all in the background. And this kind of tool palette is very familiar with anybody who's used any kind of graphical tools.
Exactly.
And so what I found when I first dove into this product, it is kind of handy. There's a lot of options. And you kind of look at it and say, you know, how do I build a graph that looks a certain way in my head? And you look up there and it looks like it's pretty much there.
Yeah, and one of the cool things, what we try to do is bridge the gap between accessing data and visualization. And notice what we did here is we started by adding a visualization and all the data populated it, right? So it was very quick. One of the cues that we were looking at is other productivity suites, like Google Apps for one, right? And so a lot of the experience you see here is similar to what people would find in a Slides or a Google Sheet. And that was really a conscious decision to make it easy for people to jump over to the gap.
Sure. So if you're going through this process, you're starting Data Studio, usually you start with an objective or a goal in mind.
Right.
So for example, if I'm in the marketing team and I want to show how many leads did I get for a specific campaign, what's the on-time run rate for any of our revenue products, et cetera. So what's the objective of the Data Studio sheet you're making right now?
So what I want to show is just a quick overview of the site that we've connected to. This would be something, if you're familiar with the analytics, like our visitors overview report. And I want to show how simple it is to create using the tool.
And the one that you're using the Google Merchandise Store.
Exactly.
So this is a legitimate external website where people can buy products that have the Google logo branded, or even this shirt that I've got on today. And so what you can do is actually pull data live and show visitor data and all that work. Go ahead.
So let me just quickly build out this report. I'm going to add a geo map here and just draw it right here on the canvas. And I'll go ahead and add a pie chart here. And notice we're pre-populating everything here. Pretty easy. Now I want to give this a title. So we'll give it a text box. And we'll just go ahead and draw right here. And let's just make the font a little bit bigger. So say website performance. Great. And let's give these maps a title. So this is countries by sessions. And what we could do is Control-C, Control-V, copy and paste this. And we can move this right over here, just very easy to drag. And these are our top sources, right? So top sources, right? Oops, I made a little mistake there. Cool. And so now I'm in this editing experience. I could come up to the right-hand side and go into the viewing experience. And now you'll see that everything's interactive.
Right? That's just a quick toggle to show from kind of a reading mode to an editing mode. And so this is what you would share with anybody else, and it would look that way when you gave it to them. Right.
Exactly. And so this is exactly what you would share. They can consume it. They can view it. And the nice thing is that this is all live data. These aren't like screenshots. Tomorrow we can configure how it updates. It's quite flexible. But that way, you're always getting the latest data, which is very nice.
And so when you say a live data, I mean, one of the cool things about it, like you said, usually you do a report and it lives inside a PowerPoint file. It lives inside of a PDF. This is a publishable URL that anybody can come visit and see regularly.
Exactly. And so to share this, to keep it really simple, as we mentioned, we rethought how you can share these reports. And one of the models we really liked was Google Drive or Google Apps and how you share a Google Doc. So we just integrated directly within that technology. So to share this report, I can click the share button. I'll get a little dialogue just like a Google Doc. And so Louis, if I wanted to share this with you,
absolutely,
I can go ahead and give you either edit or view.
I better be able to edit this document.
Right. So we'll go ahead and do that. We say like, let's collaborate. Great. And I could do a shared link if I want to make it available to everybody. I don't in this time. I'll just go ahead and send this to you. And what you'll do is you'll get an email in your inbox. And I don't know if you have your inbox open.
I'm going to open it right now. That's
okay.
exactly what I'm going to do. But you'll just have to trust me because you guys can't see my computer.
Great. So what we'll do is we'll send an email to Louis, and then he can actually go into email, click on that, and he'll be able to see this report right away.
Right.
And it's really nice. I mean, we've integrated, as I mentioned, with the docs. So if you have a Google group, you can actually share with Google Groups. And this report actually lives on Google Drive. So what we've seen is people have a folder where they add a bunch of different reports, and then they'll share the folder, and then everybody will have access to it. So there's a lot of flexibility in terms of sharing.
Excellent.
So this report is quite simple, but again, it just shows you how fast it was to build. We've added a couple capabilities. I'm not going to go through all the details here, but I just wanted to kind of give a quick highlight. For all these different reports, they're fully customizable. So if I go into this data tab here, maybe I want to add a different metric, right? So maybe I want to look at page views. So we actually have all the dimensions and metrics from the data source here. So I can search for page views here. You can see page.
And because you're pulling from Google Analytics, all the features that are in Google Analytics are displayed inside Data Studio.
All the data is available here, right? And so if I connect it to the AdWords, you would see all your AdWords data here. Right. Same thing with YouTube and so forth, right? Very cool. And so I click page views. I could see page views. I could either also interact with this. I could click on unique page views if that's really what I want. Super easy to do. The other thing is we wanted to make these reports not just static. We wanted to give them a sense of interactivity, right? And so what I could do here is actually add a control, like a date range control. I could just draw it right here. I'll go ahead and select the date range for the last 7 days. And I'll go ahead and apply that. And now notice how the report is all updating to meet that date range.
Absolutely.
Right? And so if I go into view mode and I share this with you, you will actually be able to come in here and interact with this little control. And you'll notice that there's a little calendar here, and you can actually change the date range to whatever you want. And so we have this, because it's live data, we have this ability to do these interactive reports. And notice we didn't write any code or anything. Everything just worked out of the box. It's a little bit of the Google magic there.
Absolutely.
Cool. So I shared a little bit about how the product works, how the overview. One of the big things we wanted to do is really give, when we've seen how other products were built, it's usually the engineers and the UX designers and product managers who are defining the experience. But when we talk to our customers, every customer is unique, and they have different data they want to look at. They want to be able to present this in a way that's branded around their look and feel. So one of the kind of the core design principles was full flexibility. We want to give end users full customization over the whole experience. I mean, I remember one of our original design decisions was, should we have the date range be outside of the canvas or addable? And we were saying, well, as soon as we bring stuff outside the canvas, end customers won't be able to actually decide whether they want it or they don't want it.
Right.
So that was kind of one of the big things of how we can actually customize these reports.
And one of the more powerful things, I mean, when you start a Data Studio report, it's literally a blank slate.
Exactly.
It can be anything you want. And so for some users, that might be intimidating.
Yeah.
You kind of start either with a template or I'm going to edit something. But starting with a blank slate lets people kind of go and invent on their own.
Exactly.
And so we've seen, I think maybe you can tell me some of the more interesting reports that you've been able to dive into or have people share with you.
Absolutely. And I have a couple example reports that I want to go in, all using the same tool, so you can get a sense of the scope of what's possible. So let's look at our first report. So this is an Acme. We changed the brand here, a marketing website summary. This is using also Google Analytics data. However, it looks quite different. You can see some of our comparison scorecards. This was for a healthcare company. We actually worked with them to understand the dashboards that they were creating. And so when we built this, of course, we changed the data here, but when we built this, we styled it all as a cool blue, right, to really represent the healthcare industry. I mean, we can come down here and look at the engagement by age and gender. You can see a little details, the breakdown by age. Again, it's the same data that we were looking at, just presented quite differently.
Yeah, and this reminds me of one of the fun things that I get to do is see what our users are saying about Google Analytics and Data Studio on the web. And there was a woman on Twitter who shared a completely pink dashboard. And she was just delighted with the flexibility, because it's very unusual for a Google product or a lot of products to have that kind of variation. Right. You can make a wholly pink dashboard.
And the question we always ask is, who are we to design this experience when a lot of the people really want the flexibility to create the experience themselves? Clearly, we're here to try to help and make it easier, but we really want to give full control back into the user's hands. So here's one example. Let's jump into another one. So here's another report. This is, again, looking at Google Analytics data. But what we've done here is looking at Android on the left-hand side and iOS on the right-hand side. And the way we created this was we actually took two different data sources, and we actually applied them to the same report. And I think for analytics users, this is actually one of the biggest pain points we heard, is that they actually have many different Google Analytics accounts. And they want to be able to visualize all that data in a single report. It's something you cannot do today in Google Analytics, but we make it seamless to do that directly in Data Studio. So again, this is completely two different accounts tracking two different things, but they're related because they're both about mobile applications, and so we're able to bring them into the same report. Pretty cool example. And again, look at the style. It's quite different. It's all black, and we've got some of the images, and it's really easy to see.
Absolutely. So we do have some questions that are coming in Q&A. We don't want to interrupt the demo, obviously, but like Mike was sending us a note. He said, Data Studio looks great. Should I start using it instead of custom reports and dashboards and analytics, or in addition to? Like, what do you see as the best practice here?
No, that's a great question. I mean, I think this product, Data Studio, has a lot of compelling features to make it easier to work with Google Analytics data. There are a couple of missing features today. For example, segments is one of them. And those are things that we're going to be working on. We're working on them right now. And I think what we'll see is, in the long term, the flexibility of Data Studio will probably be the best place to create these type of reports. When we look at the sharing model, sometimes it's difficult to share analytics reports because you have to give a user access to all the data. And what's nice about Data Studio reports, you could share with specific users. If you give them view access, they will only be able to see the data that's on the report, right? And so you can start tailoring these experiences, and not have people ask you questions about all the other data that you might not want them to see. And finally, what we've seen is, for larger companies that might have different divisions across the world, that they're able to use a product like this to standardize an experience across different marketing divisions. So one team will come, like the analytic team will come up with best practices, and they want all the different regions to have a same look and feel, reporting on the same KPIs. With this tool, it makes it really easy, because you can create one report, duplicate it multiple times, and just add those different data sources.
Now, one of the things we talked about when we promised users we would do this type of a live event is really talking about the vision of Data Studio and where this is going. And you've touched on that a bit, but I like your relevance where you said you spoke directly to this company and found out what their type of reports would look like. How much was it of a match of what you thought we were going to build versus what the users asked you that we should build? And what did you learn from talking to them?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think from where we really spent a lot of time thinking is through the flexible model and looking at the different technologies we have at Google and how we could leverage them. Really, our inspiration was Legos, where you have a couple key blocks that are built, but almost a unlimited amount of experiences you can build. Where we're getting a lot of feedback is more around the actual blocks themselves, the components, more capabilities around flexibility for the visualizations, more styling options, things that we knew we were going to hear. And so it's really about filling in those pieces. So I think that's really where we're looking for a lot of feedback. What are the right connectors? What are the right visualizations? Are there other ways you guys want to share it? We know being able to export to PDF is a big request as well. So it's definitely something we've now built the framework where we validated it, and now we're getting a lot of feedback to influence our roadmap on how that evolves.
Yeah. So one of the questions that came in, I think you answered previously. Nelson was wondering, are there ways to bring in non-Google data sources to Google Data Studio? And I think the answer is yes. Maybe you can show us how, or how do you accomplish pulling data in that's not from a Google product?
That's a good question. So, the vision here, as we talked, how do we project the vision, is how do we connect to all your data, right? If there's limitations in the data you connect to, you'll still export the data into a different tool. Right now, we have some Google data sources. We have two generic ones. We have a Google Sheet, where if you export data into CSV, you can put it into a sheet and access it to your Data Studio today. We actually have some third parties that have some Sheets integrations to connect to Facebook and Twitter that people have been doing social reporting directly in the product. We also have, for larger data sets, for the people who have like hundreds of gigabytes or petabytes of data, we have our BigQuery product, our big data analysis product, which we connect with, and we'll show some examples as well. Those are kind of our two starting points for generic data. Things that we're working on are, and I'll share a little of the roadmap, are connectors to SQL-based databases. So MySQL, Cloud SQL, and there's a bunch of other SQL-based databases that we're working on connectors. File import, being able to just import CSV files directly into the product is something we want to do. And then, again, what we're looking at also is then how to scale out all our connectors to third-party services. So if you're watching now and you're maybe at a company who actually provides data or has some new data that you'd like to see in Data Studio, definitely get a hold of with us so we can talk to you and see about how we can do an integration.
Now, we didn't go too deep into the difference between Data Studio 360 and Data Studio Free.
Right.
Now, my understanding is that the difference is essentially with Data Studio Free, you can create up to 5 reports and then share them out. Is that right?
It is. From a product capability, the difference is the number of reports you can create.
Mm-hmm.
Both free and 360 users can create unlimited, they can edit unlimited reports, they can view unlimited reports. Actually, they can create as many data sources as they want. What we did is limited on the number of reports you can create. The other difference, however, because the 360 is paid, is really around the integration with the 360 suite of products, the integration of user management, and in their sales and support. A lot of our larger customers want to have that support channel, and we offer that with the 360 version.
Right, because there was a question from Jennifer, who works at an agency,
Mm-hmm.
and she was saying that 5 reports in the free version isn't necessarily enough for her client base.
Right.
Typically in an agency, you have multiple client bases.
Absolutely.
You want to deliver 1 report per, however that works. So are we considering expanding that? And what do we recommend to solve that kind of as a workaround?
Yeah, and it's a good question. The product right now is in beta, right? And we're still working, to make it more available, both globally. We're also looking at how we can make it more available to other customers as well. Definitely buying the 360 version gives you a limited amount of reports you can create for your whole organization, which you can then share within your customers, right? So you can buy a license for many users and then create reports and then share them with all your different customers. And then, we're getting feedback also on, how we can also make more reports more available as we get more feedback.
Sure. And we got a lot of questions. So thanks for those of you who brought on your questions. We have more coming. Put you on the spot for each one, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's why we're here, right?
So Ben was asking, he said, first of all, great product. So kudos for that.
Thank you, yeah.
But he was saying, is there going to be an API so you can interact with Data Studio using something like AppScript?
Okay, yeah. So is that all he asked, or is it a little more qualifying details?
No, that's
it's pretty broad, right? So there's definitely ways that we want developers to be able to integrate with the product. There's definitely a way to access data. There's definitely, something we've thought about is how we can allow developers to create custom visualizations. Clearly for our integration partners, embedding reports is something that we've heard a lot of. So definitely around developer ecosystem is something that we're looking at very closely. Right now, we're really trying to solve for the end report creator and just trying to get more of these use cases. So definitely send us more information about what you're looking for so we can better understand what to build.
Right. So one person was asking, in terms of sharing these Data Studio reports, can they be sent directly to a company intranet? Possibly not on the, for example, public web. I mean, the way that we did it with the Google Drive scenario is you have a limited sharing model, right? And so you can select who gets to see it. So the question is, can you take these reports and put them on a corporate intranet somewhere?
Right. So it depends a little bit. And it really depends on how we identify users. Right now, we use a Google account to identify who a user is, who a user has access to versus who they don't. And so we need to identify what a corporate internet is by Google accounts. Currently, we do that via Google Apps. So if you're a Google Apps customer, you can actually make these reports available to everybody in your Google for Work or Google Apps domain. If you are if you're using the Google consumer accounts, or if you've signed up for Gmail, you can actually make these reports public to everybody, because we don't understand the concept of organization of all the other Google accounts that have access to it. So there's definitely ways to do it. The other option too is to create a Google group and add a bunch of people to a Google group and then give them access to it as well. So there's some flexibility.
Okay. Another question about integration is, can you export a dashboard from Google Analytics into Data Studio?
Currently, no, but it's a great feature request.
You say currently. When I hear currently, I mean, I hear soon? Do I hear the next year? That's what people are always going to have a follow-up question, you know.
Right.
What's happening there?
Right. So portability is really important. It kind of goes back to the original question. How should I build custom reports in Google Analytics or in Data Studio? And at the end of the day, we really want to give flexibility to the users to build wherever they find most useful. To give you a little background on the integration with analytics, we definitely want to find better ways to bring in existing dashboards into this tool. But however, we also see this tool being able to do many things that you can't actually bring into analytics. So there's definitely things that we're working on there on how to make it easier to migrate.
Okay. All right. So there's a question from Samdarsh asking about integrated marketing analytics. So is Data Studio suitable for integrated marketing analytics for cross-channel measurement?
Right. So right now, and I guess the question is to what level of cross-channel reporting you want to do. I mean, clearly you could bring in data from different sources into a single report. Using the Sheets connector, we've seen companies who have channels outside of Google bringing in a whole report. What's nice about these reports is each report has multiple pages, right? So here we're looking at an overview, and you can actually add a report. So we saw somebody actually create a page per channel that they were marketing on to bring it together. So it's definitely possible, and people are doing it today. And we're looking to make that integration even more seamless.
Okay. So earlier you were showing when you're pulling in data sources, YouTube was listed as an option.
Right.
And somebody was asking, the simple question was, can I bring YouTube channel data into Data Studio? So I think the answer there is yes. So what kind of information can you pull from YouTube if this were going to be something you would set up for a report?
Yeah, it's important to there's some nuances with how you access YouTube and your relationship with YouTube. Right now, what we give access to is everybody can upload their personal videos to YouTube. And that's called like an individual channel, right? So everybody who has a Google account can have an individual. So that's what we offer today. We're actually adding support for content owners. So these are large publishers who upload a lot of content to YouTube so that they can have access to data. And then for teams, they're using another way to access data through a Google Plus page. And we're actually adding support for that. That should come out over in the next month. So we want to make it a lot more accessible for businesses to be able to access their data. The data that you get from YouTube is very similar to what you'd see in the YouTube interface. You'd see the likes, views, the videos. You could trend this all over time, regional information. Actually, I think I have a demo here. Here's a sample report, just like that, where we're looking at watch time, views. We're trending it over time. We're looking at the number of likes, dislikes, subscriptions. So again, it's quite flexible. And again, this is just another report that we created using the same editor, just a different data source. Style is slightly different.
The styling is very cool. I mean, this is the type of thing where you kind of build off that look and feel of what YouTube appears like with that kind of hot red color.
Right.
This looks like, in this case, over the last 30 days or so, you got 14,000 views, which is more than I get. I guess my videos have got to be a lot more interesting or something. So yeah, this is very interesting. So one person was asking, we talked about the blank slate before. You start with an empty page. And I said for some people this might be intimidating. So for those who kind of look at it and go, where do I start? How do you recommend they get started? What kind of learning resources do we have to help with Data Studio? Yeah,
no, it's a good question. When you first come to the product for the first time, you'll see a bunch of both data sources as well, excuse me, sample reports. One of the first sample reports is Welcome to Data Studio. Definitely go into the report. It'll have you copy the report and go through a bunch of steps that we articulate in the report to just get familiar with the interface. But then you can actually go through all the samples. You'll notice here in the top left corner, it says sample in brackets. This is because this is actually one of the samples we ship directly in the product today. So we're going to be increasing the number of samples that we offer, making it easier to integrate, but definitely they're there today.
Very cool. So what kind of questions do you want to think about? Maybe this is like from the actual users themselves. But when you're fleshing out a data visualization strategy, how do you decide how to lay things out? How do you decide what kind of information is important? Where do you approach this from?
It's a good question. I mean, it always comes down for who's your audience, right? We always laugh that reporting is always selfless because you're always doing it on behalf of somebody else. So it's really coming down to like, what is the most important things for that end person to see, and then how do you make those as accessible as possible? And when we say accessible, it means making the most important things prominent. and not hiding them behind filters and controls and requiring people to interact. And I think some of the best dashboards are things that you can look at quickly and get a glance and overview without having, and answer some basic questions without having to go dig deep and explore the data.
And what I think is interesting is this kind of moves the ball from, hey, I get paid to make reports, to I get paid to do results.
Right.
And one of the hardest parts for marketing and PR people in general is to try and prove that an activity that they did created direct revenue or created a specific lead. And so one of the exciting pieces about working with Google Analytics proper is that that's what we do. We're able to show you that content came in, these audiences took an approach to it, and this is the result. And it looks like Data Studio, what you're able to do is really automate a lot of that. And so you don't need to have that one individual who takes a lot of time to create these reports. You just set it up and it auto-populates and does it on its own after a while.
Yeah, absolutely. There's two really interesting examples we've seen of that. The first example was, a team, an analytics team, was spending a lot of time doing reporting. And the team that they were reporting for were a bunch of people who are writing their own content. But those people were not sophisticated enough to use analytics, and they had too many questions. So because this tool is so easy to use, we've started to see that analytic team give control of reports back into the hands of people who are actually making decisions. And so they'll start with a template like this YouTube template, give it to somebody else, and allow that person to manipulate and edit it to answer their own questions without having come to the analytics team. And I think that's really fascinating, because if we're spending so much time doing reporting, we're not spending time doing analysis. And if we could automate and give the people who are asking the questions the power to answer their own questions, it gives analysts a lot more time to do things that have a higher impact. The other case that we saw, and this was really cool, is that companies who have partnerships with a different company sometimes are reporting, right? Like an agency is reporting for their client. And with a product like this, you can brand it. And so what we've seen people do is co-brand with the agency and the client in a single report and share it with the customer. And because this is all live updating and real-time collaboration, if the agency is looking at this and sees a spike, they can quickly get on and chat with their customer to say, hey, let's look at this report together, because it's just updated. And that level of communication currently doesn't exist, because you actually have to export to a PowerPoint and share it over email. People have questions. You can't do that every day. And here you can come in every day and start talking with a customer. It's actually, what we're seeing is people shifting the way they communicate with data, because the data is updating in a lot faster intervals.
And so one thing that I've seen a lot, I mean, at Google Analytics, is the growth, really an explosion of mobile. Right. And so the things that we always used to do on these desktops or laptops, we're doing with our phones as we walk around. The new Google Analytics app is super smart, has intelligence that gives you kind of alerts to when things are changing. So what's the mobile approach for Data Studio? Is there an app for that? Is there a way that I can get into the Data Studio and take a look at as I'm mobile? Yeah,
absolutely. Great question. So we see kind of two users of the product for these reports. One of them is a report creator, who's really building this curated experience. And then there's the viewer. Right now, all the reports are viewable on tablets and mobile phones. So you can share this report. It'll come into your inbox. You can click on it, and you can actually view the data right there. On the creation side, we still have a desktop, because what we've seen is a lot of publishers are still in that desktop experience. I think mobile is kind of one place to actually consume data. We're also looking at many other ways that people can consume these reports. We want to be really spanning all devices, whether it's just phones or TVs and so forth.
No, absolutely. Although probably a little more difficult to create a Data Studio report on the TV until the input devices are better.
Right, and I think that's the difference between, you have an authoring tool that's quite powerful, but then you allow that tool to project these reports into many different environments and to distribute them as flexibly as possible.
Sure. So I think we talked about this a bit earlier. Michael wants to know, do you need a registered or confirmed Google account to access this?
You need a Google account to access the product, correct.
Okay, so that's a yes. What about support for a single data model from multiple sources? I think you showed us a report that had Android on the left, and had iOS on the right. So what about a single data model from multiple sources?
It's a great question. We hear this question a lot. It's something that we're looking at very closely. Right now, you could bring two data sources right into a single report. And just to kind of share what we're looking at, we want to be able to merge those two so you can get kind of this unified view across both of them. So it's something that we're definitely looking at. We've heard from a lot of customers. I'm pretty excited about it. We'll just take a little bit of time to add.
I'm going to go off script here. No questions from this side.
All right.
So what can users expect going forward at Data Studio? I'm not saying here publish your roadmap, but obviously the number 1 through 10 question is, when is it going to launch in my country? I hear this all the time on social. Maybe you can give us a little hint on that, or what's up with that. And then the second piece, what are the burning pieces that you're hearing from users that you absolutely want to build next?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So in terms of kind of what we really want to do is make this product as accessible as possible. Right now it's US only, so we're working hard to bring it, to make it global. We hope to have many more countries supported by the end of the year. That's definitely a goal for us. In terms of kind of what are some of the pain points that we're hearing, one of them is around this whole concept of blank canvas. We can engineer as many features as possible, but the one thing we can't engineer is creativity. And so the way we're approaching it is, how can we actually create a library of samples and best practices and starting points, so you're not looking only at a blank canvas, you actually have a bunch of options to start the experience. And I think that's really exciting, because it starts shifting the way that people start collaborating with sharing data and sharing best practices. I think that's one area that's quite exciting for us. The other area is really working with the raw data. When we connect to some of these data sources, the data is really well defined. All the dimensions and metrics are there. But within this product, you actually have the ability to do more data transformations. You can do aggregations, you can do calculations, you can do derived fields and dimensions. It's quite powerful. And one of the things we want to do is continue investing along that track to make it easier for people to manipulate data, to kind of get that unified data source is one of those examples that we've talked about. So I think the data manipulation is an amazing area. Again, if you can't get your data in the format that you want, then you're not going to be able to visualize it, right? And so it's kind of a core piece that we're seeing people having to use multiple tools, and we think we could streamline that effort.
So I know we've had a lot of good questions that have come in. I do want to make sure that we wrap solid. Can you give me the URL that anybody should go to learn more?
Yes, it's datastudio.google.com. You can go there. Everybody should have access to that. And if you're in the United States, you can actually start creating reports.
Okay. So this was actually the first in a series of ongoing live events that we're going to be doing all throughout this summer. We have another one we're hoping to debut in a couple of weeks with Nikhil Roy. And then 2 weeks after that, we're going to have Dave Olison come on, also on the Data Studio team. So we definitely appreciate all of your questions and all of the live viewers who've come through. Again, I'm Louis Gray here with Nick Mihailovski, and we'll see you again soon.